I am Nia, and at 30 years old, I attended my sister's lavish Atlanta wedding, only to be seated next to the swinging kitchen doors. But the true humiliation began when my mother dragged me to the center of the ballroom and demanded the keys to my penthouse as a wedding gift for the newlyweds. When I calmly said no, she slapped me so hard my pearl earring flew across the marble floor. I did not shed a single tear. I picked up my earring, walked out the heavy oak doors, and made one phone call. An hour later, the reception doors burst open and my mother started screaming. Before I share exactly what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to destroy the toxic family members who severely underestimated your worth. Growing up in the affluent circles of Buckhead, Atlanta, my parents Warren and Dolores cared about exactly one thing: maintaining the perfect facade of high society success. My older sister Kendra was their golden child. She was groomed for greatness, given luxury cars, and eventually matched with Preston, a white man from a supposedly prestigious old money family. I was the dark mark on their perfect family portrait. When I dropped out of college years ago due to severe burnout, they completely wrote me off. They told all their wealthy friends I was a struggling freelance florist who barely made rent. They had absolutely no idea that my floral business was just a front. They did not know I had spent the last decade quietly building a massive real estate portfolio, completely independent of their corrupt money. The wedding reception at the Grand Buckhead was an extravagant display of wealth they did not actually have. There were 300 elite guests, crystal chandeliers dripping with imported orchids, and a 10-tier cake. I was invited out of pure obligation. My mother assigned me to table 42 right next to the kitchen, where the servers constantly bumped my chair with their heavy trays. I sat quietly sipping sparkling water in my simple silk dress, watching my family perform for the crowd. Kendra wore a custom designer gown, and Preston paraded around with a smug sense of entitlement, soaking up my parents' eager validation. Just before the main course was served, I felt a sharp grip on my upper arm. It was my mother, Dolores. Her designer nails dug into my skin as she forcefully pulled me up from my chair. She did not say a single word until she had dragged me away from the kitchen and into a highly visible alcove near the center of the ballroom, where Kendra and Preston were standing with their champagne flutes. My mother forced a tight plastic smile for the passing photographers before turning her cold eyes on me. She extended her manicured hand, palm facing up. "Hand them over," she demanded, her voice a harsh whisper. "Hand what over?" I asked, completely genuinely confused by her sudden aggression. "The keys to the penthouse," Dolores hissed, stepping closer so I could smell the expensive gin on her breath. "Kendra and Preston need a place in the city that reflects his family status. You are going to give them the keys to your apartment as their wedding gift. You can pack your cheap clothes and move back into our old basement until you find another place." I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of her demand. I leased that penthouse under a corporate shell company to maintain my privacy, but my family only knew I lived there. They assumed I was merely renting a small room, or perhaps house-sitting for a wealthy client. "Mom, I live there," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly level. "It is my home." "It is a waste of space," Dolores spat out, her anger rising above her controlled whisper. "Look at you, Nia. You are a college dropout who arranges flowers for a living. Preston comes from old money. His family is flying in from overseas next month. Do you honestly think my golden child is going to entertain his elite parents in a cramped starter home while you selfishly occupy a luxury penthouse? Give me the keys right now." Kendra stepped forward, taking a delicate sip of her champagne. "Come on, Nia, do not be selfish for once in your life. Preston and I have an image to maintain. You can easily find some rundown studio that fits your florist budget." Preston chuckled, wrapping an arm around Kendra. He looked at me with undisguised contempt. "We are doing you a favor, really. You clearly cannot afford the maintenance on a place like that anyway. Hand over the keys, and I will personally pay your first month of rent at a normal apartment." The condescension was suffocating. They were entirely convinced of their superiority, attempting to bully me out of my own home in the middle of a wedding reception. Several guests at nearby tables had stopped talking and were openly staring at us. I looked at Preston, then at Kendra, and finally at my mother. No, I said calmly, taking a step back. I am not giving you my keys. That penthouse is mine. The word no seemed to short-circuit my mother's brain. For her entire life, she had dictated every aspect of our family dynamic. No one ever defied her, especially not the daughter she deemed worthless. Her face contorted with pure, unadulterated rage. "You ungrateful little brat," she snarled. Before I could brace myself, her hand flew through the air. The slap echoed sharply across the marble floor. It was a vicious, open-handed strike that snapped my head to the side. The force of the impact tore my pearl earring from my earlobe, sending it skittering across the polished floor. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby guests. The string quartet seemed to falter for a split second before nervously playing louder. I tasted the metallic tang of blood where my teeth had bitten into my lower lip. My cheek burned with a fiery, intense heat. Kendra let out a soft, cruel laugh. Preston just smirked, clearly enjoying the display of dominance. They waited for me to break. They expected the old Nia, the terrified girl who used to cry and apologize for existing. But I did not cry. My heart was completely steady. I slowly turned my head back to face my mother. I reached up and wiped the small drop of blood from the corner of my mouth. Then, without rushing, I walked a few steps over, picked up my pearl earring, and dropped it into my clutch. The scream that ripped from the throat of my mother echoed across the grand ballroom, completely silencing the string quartet and the 300 elite guests. She stumbled backward, catching her designer heels on the marble floor, and grabbed the edge of the nearest table to stop herself from collapsing. The man walking down the center aisle was someone she recognized instantly. It was Elias Thorne. Elias was not just any corporate attorney in Atlanta. He was the supreme wealth manager and executor of the estate of my late grandmother, Nana Ruby. When Nana Ruby passed away 2 years ago, my mother Dolores paraded around Buckhead, telling everyone in her social circle that she had successfully bought Elias off. She boasted at every country club luncheon that she had secured the entirety of the massive family trust fund, leaving the rest of us with nothing. She was so arrogant, so absolutely certain that money could corrupt any man. But looking at Elias now with his imposing stride and that specific mahogany briefcase, my mother knew her web of lies was unraveling right in front of the highest society in the city. Warren. My father immediately rushed forward, attempting to block Elias from reaching the main stage. He threw on his best fake business smile, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "Elias, my friend?" Warren stammered nervously, sweating through his expensive tuxedo. "This is a private family celebration. Whatever business we have can surely wait until Monday morning at the office." Elias did not even slow his pace. He bypassed my father as if he were nothing more than a piece of cheap furniture. Stepping up onto the main stage, Elias walked directly to the microphone stand, where my new brother-in-law Preston was still standing, frozen with a half-empty champagne flute. "Give me that microphone," Elias demanded in a voice that left absolutely no room for negotiation. Preston, trying to maintain his old-money alpha male facade, puffed out his chest and refused to hand it over. Elias simply reached out, gripped the microphone stand, and pulled it sharply toward himself, forcing Preston to stumble awkwardly out of the way. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Elias announced, his deep baritone voice booming through the sound system. "I apologize for interrupting the festivities, but I am here on official legal business. 2 years ago, my client Ruby Washington left very specific, strict instructions regarding her final will and testament. She ordered me to seal the true document in a vault and only execute it on the exact day and time that her eldest granddaughter Kendra walked down the aisle." The entire ballroom erupted into a chaotic symphony of shocked gasps and hushed whispers. I stood near the heavy oak doors, watching the color completely drain from the face of Kendra. She looked like a ghost trapped in a $10,000 wedding dress. My mother was hyperventilating, clutching her chest, while my father frantically typed on his phone, likely trying to summon his own useless lawyers. Preston looked utterly confused, snapping at Kendra to explain what was happening. Elias placed the heavy mahogany briefcase on the podium. The click of the brass locks echoed loudly through the silent room. He pulled out a crisp ivory envelope sealed with red wax. "Before I announce the rightful distribution of the Washington Family Trust, Elias continued staring directly at my mother. Dolores, I have a personal message from Ruby that she wished to be read to her guests today. Elias opened the letter and began to read the words of my grandmother. To my daughter-in-law, Dolores, and my son Warren, you spent years parading around Atlanta pretending to be the epitome of black excellence while your souls rotted with greed. You thought I did not know about the money. You thought you covered your tracks perfectly. Elias paused, letting the tension build in the room before delivering the fatal blow. 3 years ago, when my heart was failing and I desperately needed a bypass surgery, you two drained $200,000 from my emergency medical fund. You claimed it was lost in a bad market investment, but I hired a private investigator. You stole the heart surgery money of your own mother just to buy Kendra a custom Porsche to impress her wealthy friends. The fallout was instantaneous and explosive. The wealthy guests who had just been praising my parents suddenly stepped away from them in utter disgust. Whispers of thief and murderer began to circulate through the crowd. My mother buried her face in her hands, sobbing hysterically, and begging the crowd not to believe the lies. Kendra dropped her champagne glass, screaming at Elias that he was a senile old fool who was ruining her perfect day. Preston, the man who supposedly had endless wealth, looked absolutely horrified. He grabbed Kendra by the arm, shaking her aggressively, demanding to know if her family was actually broke. Warren tried to rush the stage again, shouting threats of defamation lawsuits, but Elias simply raised his hand, silencing the room once more. I watched it all with a cold, calculated satisfaction. For years they had painted me as the villain, the failure, the embarrassing mistake. Now their immaculate, polished masks were completely ripped off, exposing the hideous monsters underneath. But Elias was not finished. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound document. This is the finalized, untouchable legal distribution of the $40 million Washington estate, Elias declared, holding the document high in the air for every single guest to see. Dolores and Warren have explicitly been written out of this will. Furthermore, the glowing bride, Kendra, will not ever receive a single dime of this $40 million family fortune today. The entire room completely stopped breathing. The silence was so absolute you could hear a pin drop. Everyone held their breath, anxiously waiting for the final heir name to emerge now. Elias stood tall on the podium. The entire room of 300 guests was completely silent, waiting for the name of the true heir. He unrolled the heavy parchment document with deliberate, agonizing slowness. The late Ruby Washington was a woman of immense foresight, Elias said. She knew the poison that had infected her son and daughter-in-law. She knew that protecting her legacy meant bypassing them entirely. Therefore, the entirety of the Washington Family Trust, which includes vast real estate holdings, diverse stock portfolios, and liquid assets totaling exactly $40 million, is to be transferred immediately to her youngest granddaughter. Elias looked directly at me. Nia Washington. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. $40 million. Mine. It was not a surprise to me, of course. Nana Ruby had told me her plan during those long, quiet nights in her hospital room when I was the only one holding her hand. But to everyone else in that ballroom, it was an absolute earthquake. My mother Dolores let out a sound that was half gasp and half wail. Her legs gave out completely. She collapsed onto the pristine marble floor, her expensive silk dress pooling awkwardly around her. "This is a lie," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Elias. "You forged this document. You are a fraud. My husband will have you disbarred for this." Warren tried to pull her up, but she slapped his hands away, tearing at her own perfectly styled hair. Kendra reacted differently. The golden child who had planned her entire luxurious future around that $40 million completely snapped. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unhinged rage. She hiked up the skirt of her heavy wedding gown and actually sprinted toward the stage. She lunged forward desperately, trying to snatch the document right out of the hands of the lawyer. "Give me that paper, you lying old fool," Kendra screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "That money belongs to me. It is my wedding day. You are ruining my life." She never even reached the podium. Two massive bodyguards who had quietly escorted Elias into the building stepped forward smoothly. They formed an impenetrable wall of muscle blocking Kendra. She crashed into them, sobbing and thrashing like a spoiled toddler throwing a tantrum. The elite guests of Atlanta watched in absolute horror as the beautiful bride humiliated herself completely. That was when Preston decided to intervene. My new brother-in-law marched onto the stage, his face red with a mixture of embarrassment and fury. He could not stand the fact that his wealthy, high society image was being shattered in front of his old money peers. He shoved past Kendra and violently ripped the microphone from the stand, causing a loud feedback screech to echo through the venue. "Listen to me, you absolute pieces of trash!" Preston barked into the microphone, his voice shaking with uncontrolled rage. His carefully crafted polite facade completely melted away, revealing the vile classist monster underneath. He pointed his finger directly at me, standing calmly by the kitchen doors. "I do not care what fake papers you printed out in the back room of your little flower shop, Nia. You are nothing but a lower-class college dropout. You do not belong in a place like this, and you certainly do not deserve a single dime of this grand estate. My family comes from generations of real wealth and immense power. We do not tolerate street-level scams from pathetic, desperate losers like you." He turned his attention to the back of the room where the hotel management was frantically watching the chaos unfold. "Security," Preston roared, waving his hands wildly. "I am a platinum VIP guest at the Grand Buckhead. My family spends hundreds of thousands of dollars at this establishment every single year. I demand that you throw these two frauds out immediately. Call the police right now and have this brat arrested for trespassing and forgery. Get them out of my sight before I destroy the reputation of this entire building." The heavy wooden doors at the back of the ballroom swung open violently. A squad of 10 hotel security guards marched into the room, their expressions deadly serious. They moved in perfect synchronization, heading straight down the center aisle toward the stage and my table. Dolores scrambled to her feet, a wicked, triumphant smile spreading across her tear-stained face. She wiped her eyes and glared at me with pure venom. "Enjoy your time in a cold jail cell, Nia." My mother spat, her voice dripping with absolute malice. "I will make sure they lock you away for a very long time. You will finally pay for all of this unnecessary public humiliation you have caused us." Kendra stopped thrashing against the bodyguards and smirked, adjusting her ruined wedding dress. "Finally, some order," Kendra said, wiping her nose. "Take the trash out and let us get back to my perfect celebration. I want her gone right now." The guests murmured among themselves, stepping back to clear a path for the approaching guards. Everyone waited to see me aggressively handcuffed and completely humiliated. They waited for me to be dragged out, kicking and screaming into the night. The heavy boots of the security team echoed loudly across the marble floor as they reached the front of the room. They surrounded the stage area, moving with absolute military precision. But they did not move toward me. They did not pull out their handcuffs. They did not even look at me with anger. Instead, they stopped dead in their tracks, turned their broad backs to me, and stood in a tight protective formation, quietly waiting for my next official command. The entire room fell into a state of complete and utter shock as my mother dropped her jaw in sheer terror, realizing the horrible truth. I was the one holding the real power today. Nobody could save them from me. Preston's face turned purple. He marched to the security captain, pointing aggressively. "I gave you a direct order," he yelled. "Arrest this woman immediately." The captain, named Marcus, did not flinch. He slowly turned his head to look at Preston with pure boredom. Marcus turned his back on the furious groom, took 2 steps toward me, and bowed. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice echoing across the silent ballroom. "Do you want us to dispose of these disruptive guests?" The collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the room. My mother, Dolores, let out a desperate wheeze. Kendra stared with wide eyes, clutching her torn wedding gown. Preston looked physically struck. "Dispose of us?" Preston shrieked, cracking in panic. "I am a platinum VIP. You work for me." I took a slow breath, letting absolute victory wash over me. I reached into my leather clutch and pulled out a solid black titanium card. It was the master ownership insignia for the Sterling Hospitality Group, the parent company owning the Grand Buckhead, and a dozen commercial properties. I walked past the security guards and stepped up to the podium. I held the black titanium card high in the air. The spotlight caught the gold lettering, making it shine. "Preston," I said, my voice slicing through the heavy tension. "You are not a VIP. You are not an important guest. You are standing in my building. This hotel and the very ground you are throwing your temper tantrum on belong to me." The silence was shattered by an uproar of shocked conversations. The socialites of Atlanta whispered frantically, pointing at my exposed family. For 8 years, my parents told everyone that I was a miserable college dropout who arranged cheap flowers to barely make rent, I announced, staring down at my mother shaking on the floor. I let them spread that fake narrative because it provided the perfect cover. The floral shop they mocked was actually the registered address for my private holding company. While you were buying luxury cars on credit to look wealthy, I was quietly buying up commercial real estate. I bought the commercial block, I bought this hotel, I bought the venues where you fake your miserable lives. Kendra shook her head wildly, refusing to accept the harsh reality. "No," Kendra screamed, stamping her foot like a spoiled child. "You are lying. You are just a loser. You live in a damp basement. You own nothing." I turned my cold gaze to my sister. The golden child who tormented me my entire life was standing in a ruined dress, stripped of her $40 million inheritance, and facing the sister she relentlessly bullied. "I have not lived in a basement for a long time, Kendra," I replied smoothly, pacing the stage. "I leased the top-floor penthouse in the financial district. The exact penthouse Mother aggressively demanded I hand over tonight. You wanted a luxury home to impress Preston and his wealthy family. The joke is on you." I turned to Preston, who was sweating profusely, his fake old money confidence obliterated. "Preston, you act like you own the world, but my financial team ran a background check on your precious family. You are drowning in massive debt. You married my sister because you thought she was getting $40 million today. You are a broke, desperate fraud trying to use my family as an ATM." Preston staggered backward, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. The wealthy guests who had been drinking his expensive champagne now stared at him with absolute disgust and pure contempt. Kendra looked at Preston, pure horror washing over her face, as she realized her perfect billionaire husband was entirely broke. She had married a financial sinking ship, and now she had nothing left. "Marcus," I said, turning back to the captain of security, "I am tired of looking at these toxic people. Cancel the catering, shut down the open bar, escort Dolores, Warren, Kendra, and Preston out of my hotel immediately. Throw them out through the service elevator where the garbage is kept." Marcus nodded sharply. "With pleasure, ma'am." The security team moved in instantly. They grabbed Preston, dragging him away as he kicked and shouted pathetic threats. 2 guards hauled Kendra up by her arms. She thrashed wildly, sobbing and begging me to stop this and give her the money. Dolores cried hysterically, reaching out for me as she was pulled across the cold marble floor, her image of high society excellence destroyed forever. It was the ultimate vindication. The family that treated me like dirt was being dragged out with the trash in front of the city. But as a security guard grabbed the shoulder of my father Warren, something changed. Warren did not fight the guards. He did not scream or beg like the rest. Instead, he planted his feet firmly on the ground and let out a dark, vicious laugh that echoed loudly. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a folded, yellowing piece of paper. He held it up, gripping it tightly in his fist. "You really think you have won this game, Nia?" Warren growled, his eyes burning with a sinister, triumphant light. "You think because you own this hotel and inherited that money, you can throw us away like garbage?" I frowned, looking down at the piece of paper in his hand. "What is that?" I demanded, my voice losing its calm. Warren smiled, a cold, menacing smile that sent a sudden, sharp chill straight down my spine. He waved the paper aggressively in the air, ensuring Elias and I could see it. "You might be a powerful real estate mogul now, my dear daughter," Warren mocked loudly enough for the remaining crowd to hear. "But you are forgetting what happened exactly 8 years ago. Take a very close look at whose signature is at the bottom of this legally binding contract. You are about to lose every penny you just claimed." The ballroom felt suffocatingly hot as Warren unfolded the yellowing document. He held it with both hands, making sure the bold printed heading at the top was perfectly visible to me and Elias. It was an unlimited debt guarantee contract. My stomach dropped as my eyes locked onto the messy, slanted signature at the very bottom of the final page. It was undeniably my handwriting, but it looked chaotic, as if written by someone who could barely keep their eyes open. Then the dark memories from exactly 8 years ago hit me like a freight train. I was 22 years old and suffocating under the weight of a severe clinical depression caused entirely by my family relentlessly tearing me down. I had been locked in that damp basement for weeks, barely eating and constantly crying. Warren had come downstairs one evening, acting like a concerned father. He brought me a cup of hot tea and a handful of pills he promised were just strong vitamins to help me sleep and recover. I was so desperate for a single ounce of parental affection that I swallowed them without a second thought. As the heavy sedatives dragged me into a deep, foggy stupor, Warren placed a thick stack of papers in front of me. He guided my heavy hand across the pages, whispering that they were just standard tax forms to keep me on his health insurance. I signed them in a complete haze, trusting the man who was actually selling me out. Now, 8 years later, my father was weaponizing my darkest moment of vulnerability against me. My investment firm just completely defaulted on a massive $15 million commercial loan, Warren announced, his voice booming with malicious joy. The creditors are circling like sharks, waiting to rip my company apart. But thanks to this beautiful piece of paper you signed, my dear daughter, you are legally bound as the absolute primary guarantor for all my corporate debts. He stepped closer, waving the contract in my face. With this single document, the banks will completely bypass me and come straight for your deep pockets. First thing Monday morning, my lawyers will hand this over to the central bank. They will immediately freeze all your corporate accounts, seize your properties, and lock down every single dime of that $40 million trust fund you just inherited. Warren laughed, a dark, guttural sound. You thought you could humiliate us and walk away a billionaire. You are going to be left with absolutely nothing but the clothes on your back. You will be completely bankrupt before noon on Monday. The sudden shift in power breathed new life into the monsters standing in front of me. Preston, who had been cowering in the grip of the security guards, suddenly ripped his arm free. He straightened his ruined tuxedo jacket and let out a loud, arrogant bark of laughter. I knew a pathetic street-level fraud like you could never outsmart incredibly powerful real businessmen, Preston sneered, stepping back to stand beside Kendra. You truly thought you had us permanently beat. You are about to lose your entire imaginary empire today and go right back to being a broke, pathetic nobody. Kendra wiped her tears and stood up tall, her face twisting into a hideous mask of triumph. She crossed her arms and glared at me with pure hatred. You tried to ruin my perfect wedding, Nia, Kendra spat. But instead, you just agreed to pay off $15 million of dad debt. I cannot wait to watch the banks drag you out of your fancy office in handcuffs. Dolores pushed herself up from the marble floor, brushing the dust off her silk dress. Her previous terror was completely replaced by overwhelming greed. She pointed a manicured finger directly at my chest. Since you will be completely broke and homeless by Monday, I suggest you pack your bags right now. Dolores demanded, her voice dripping with venom. I will be moving my things straight into your downtown penthouse next week. Make sure you scrub the floors before you leave. I do not want to smell your cheap perfume when I take over your home. I did not argue. I did not scream. I simply looked at Elias, who gave me a subtle, reassuring nod. I signaled Marcus, the security captain. Throw them out, I repeated calmly. The guards immediately shoved my loudly gloating family out the service doors, tossing them into the cold Atlanta night. The long weekend passed in a tense, deeply silent blur. I did not waste a single second panicking or crying over my father's malicious financial threat. I spent every waking hour aggressively making phone calls, pulling highly encrypted financial files, and meticulously setting up the ultimate executive execution. Monday morning arrived with a heavy downpour of rain over the city. At exactly 9 o'clock, Warren arrived at the towering glass headquarters of my real estate holding company. He was not alone. He marched through the sliding glass doors accompanied by his sleazy defense attorney and three stern-looking representatives from the central bank. They walked past the reception desk with absolute arrogant authority, acting like they already owned the entire building. Warren led the aggressive group straight toward the executive suites on the top floor. He did not bother waiting for my assistant or asking for permission to enter. He marched directly toward the massive frosted glass doors of my primary executive boardroom. "It is time to collect what is mine," Warren announced to his lawyer, a greedy smirk plastered across his face. "Let us strip this ungrateful brat of everything she has." Warren violently shoved the heavy glass boardroom doors open, ready to deliver the final killing blow to my career. He strode confidently into the massive room, proudly holding the signed guarantee contract high in the cold morning air. He expected to find me crying and begging for his mercy, but the arrogant, confident words died instantly in his throat. The greedy smirk vanished from his face, replaced by an expression of absolute paralyzing horror. Warren and his elite legal team froze dead in their tracks, completely terrified by the unexpected scene, waiting patiently for them inside the room. Warren shoved the frosted glass doors open, expecting to find me frantically packing my belongings into cardboard boxes while crying over my shattered empire. He strutted into my primary executive boardroom, waving that yellowed guarantee contract like a victory flag. Dolores, Kendra, and Preston pushed their way in right after him, eager to watch my final humiliating downfall. The malicious smirks melted off their faces the second they took in the scene. I was not crying. I was not packing. I was sitting comfortably at the head of a 20-foot custom mahogany conference table, sipping a freshly brewed espresso. But what truly froze the blood in my father's veins were the 5 individuals sitting quietly around the table with me. Warren recognized the powerful executives sitting before him immediately. These were 5 of the most ruthless high-level executive directors from the largest investment funds on Wall Street. They were the primary holders of every massive debt Warren owed. "Welcome to my office, Warren," I said, setting my espresso cup down with a sharp clink. Warren swallowed hard, looking frantically from the executives back to me. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice losing all its previous booming authority. "Why are the managing directors of Vanguard and BlackRock sitting in your office?" I smiled, steepling my fingers. "As the new majority shareholder of the very banks that hold your commercial loans, I thought it would be highly beneficial to invite your absolute biggest creditors to discuss your total financial insolvency face to face." Preston stepped forward, trying to salvage his fake elite persona. He adjusted his collar and scoffed loudly. "My family has done business with these institutions for 3 generations. We are an untouchable cornerstone of high society. They would never side with a street-level fraud over the Preston legacy." I shifted my gaze to Preston. I reached beside my chair and picked up a thick, heavy black folder. I tossed it across the slick mahogany table. It slid perfectly, stopping right in front of Preston and Kendra. "Let us talk about the legendary Preston legacy," I said, my voice dripping with cold, calculated amusement. "I had my team do a deep dive into your precious old money vaults over the weekend. I wanted to see exactly how wealthy the man who called me lower class truly was." "Open the folder, Kendra. I think you, as his new wife, should be the very first person to read the actual numbers." Kendra snatched the folder, her hands shaking slightly. She flipped it open. Her eyes darted across the highlighted financial statements, tax returns, and bank notices. As she read the documents, the remaining color drained from her face. Her breathing became shallow and erratic. "No," Kendra whispered, her voice trembling. "This cannot be right. Preston, you told me your trust was worth $100 million. You told me you owned the estate in the Hamptons." I leaned forward, resting both my elbows on the table. "He lied to you, Kendra. The Preston family filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago. The Hamptons estate was seized by tax agents. Those designer suits he wears are leased. But that is not even the best part. Turn to the 3rd page, Kendra. Tell the room about his favorite hobby." Kendra flipped the page. Her eyes widened in absolute horror. $10 million, she gasped, dropping the folder on the table as if it burned her. "You owe $10 million to offshore gambling syndicates." Preston lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers away. But one of the Wall Street executives, a stern woman in a gray suit, slammed her hand down on the documents. "The numbers are entirely accurate," the executive stated coldly. "Mr. Preston has been defaulting on his massive debts for 36 months. We were preparing to file federal criminal charges against him this week for wire fraud." I looked at Kendra, who was now backing away from Preston as if he were a wild animal. "He did not marry you out of love, Kendra," I explained calmly. "He married you because Dolores spent 2 years loudly bragging to everyone in Atlanta that you were guaranteed to inherit $40 million from Nana Ruby. He needed your grandmother's money to pay off his dangerous gambling debts before the loan sharks broke his legs. He is a broke, desperate parasite, and you fell for his fake accent and cheap charm, hook, line, and sinker." Preston stammered violently, shaking his head and reaching out for Kendra. "Please do not listen to her. I can fix this. I have investments turning around. It is just a temporary liquidity issue." Kendra slapped his hands away, tears of pure humiliation streaming down her face. "You used me," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "You are completely broke. You have nothing." Warren, seeing his wealthy son-in-law exposed as a total fraud, panicked. His entire world was collapsing, but he still held that yellowed contract in his sweaty fist. He waved it aggressively, stepping forward. "It does not matter," Warren roared, spitting as he spoke. "None of this matters. I have the signed guarantee right here. Nia signed this contract 8 years ago. She is legally responsible for my $15 million corporate debt. She has to pay. The law says she must pay right now. Freeze her accounts. Take her money. Take the hotel. She owes me. She has to pay." The executives at the table looked at me, waiting for my response. I did not break a sweat. I simply smiled, leaning back in my leather chair. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black remote control for the boardroom projector. "You really think a piece of paper signed in a dark basement under heavy coercion is going to save you today?" I asked, pressing the power button on the remote. "Let us see if that pathetic piece of paper actually holds any legal water, shall we, Dad?" The large projector screen behind me hummed to life instantly, bathing the dark boardroom in a bright, sterile white light. Warren tightened his grip on the yellowed contract, still breathing heavily with malicious anticipation. He genuinely believed that single piece of paper was his ultimate trump card. I pressed the remote again, and a highly detailed medical document appeared on the massive screen. It was an official toxicology and forensic evaluation report, complete with the signature and seal of the Chief Medical Examiner of Atlanta. "What is this garbage?" Warren barked, stepping closer to the screen. "You cannot distract the banks with fake medical records, Naya. You signed a binding corporate guarantee." I stood up slowly, leaning my hands against the polished mahogany table. I directed my attention to the 5 Wall Street executives who were already squinting at the projected document. If you look closely at the date and timestamp on the contract my father is holding, I explained, my voice echoing clearly across the room. "You will see. It was signed on October 14th, exactly 8 years ago at 9 in the evening. Now please review the forensic toxicology report currently displayed on the screen behind me." That report was generated from a blood sample taken from me at the emergency room at 11 o'clock that exact same night. The lead executive from BlackRock leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. Her eyes scanned the medical jargon quickly. She let out a sharp sigh of disbelief. For those who do not want to read the fine print, I continued walking slowly around the edge of the conference table. The report confirms that at the exact moment my father forced me to sign that corporate guarantee, my bloodstream contained enough heavy sedatives to tranquilize a horse. I was medically and legally incapacitated. I lacked any basic cognitive function, let alone the legal capacity to authorize a $15 million financial guarantee. Warren staggered backward, as if he had been physically struck in the chest. He looked down at the yellowed paper in his hand, his face turning an unhealthy shade of gray. "That is a complete lie," Warren shouted frantically, waving his hands. She was perfectly fine. She knew exactly what she was signing. She agreed to help the family business. The BlackRock executive stood up and snatched the contract right out of the hands of my father. She inspected the messy, slanted signature and then looked at the medical report on the screen. She threw the useless piece of paper back onto the table with absolute disgust. This contract is entirely void and legally unenforceable. The executive stated, her tone dripping with pure ice. You drugged your own daughter to commit financial fraud, Warren. Did you honestly think our legal department would not thoroughly investigate the primary guarantor before moving forward with a $15 million collection? We knew this document was worthless yesterday. We only came here today at the invitation of your daughter to witness your final default in person. Warren opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Dolores, who had been standing silently near the door, let out a pathetic whimper, realizing her husband had completely failed to secure the money. The representative from Vanguard unzipped his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of freshly printed legal forms. He tossed them onto the table, sliding them directly toward my father. Since the guarantee is completely void and your corporate accounts are entirely empty, you are officially in severe default, the Vanguard representative announced. We have already filed the necessary paperwork with the federal bankruptcy court this morning. We are actively seizing all your remaining corporate assets. Furthermore, since you illegally used your personal properties as collateral to keep your failing business afloat, we are executing an immediate foreclosure on your primary residence. Dolores shrieked, lunging forward to grab the arm of my father. Warren! Tell them they cannot do this! Dolores cried hysterically, tears ruining her expensive makeup. Tell them they cannot take the Buckhead mansion. Where are we supposed to live? You have exactly 48 hours to vacate the premises, the Vanguard executive continued, completely ignoring the tears of my mother. Federal marshals will arrive on Wednesday morning to lock the gates and seize all luxury vehicles currently parked on the property. Have a nice day. The 5 executives packed their briefcases and marched out of the boardroom, leaving my parents standing in the ashes of their fake elite empire. Dolores sank into a chair, weeping loudly about losing her social status and her country club memberships. Warren stared blankly at the wall, a broken, ruined man. But the chaos was not over. Kendra, who had been watching her entire wealthy future disintegrate, suddenly let out a piercing, manic scream. The golden child was pushed entirely over the edge. She stomped toward me, her eyes wild and bloodshot. She reached into her designer purse and aggressively pulled out a small silver USB drive, pointing it at my face like a weapon. You think you are so smart? Nia Kendra hissed, her voice shaking with unhinged desperation. You think you can just destroy our family and walk away a billionaire hero? If you do not pay off their debt and give me my inheritance right now, I am going to destroy your precious little company. I raised an eyebrow, staring blankly at the tiny metal drive in her hand. And how exactly do you plan to do that, Kendra? Kendra smiled, a sick, twisted smile that showed all her teeth. I have a video, Naya. A very special hidden video taken inside the hospital room of Nana Ruby just a few days before she died. It shows you aggressively shouting at a sick, dying old woman. It shows you snatching things out of her hands and making her cry. I felt a sudden jolt of adrenaline. I remembered that day perfectly. I had been arguing with Nana Ruby because she was refusing to eat her meals, and I was desperately trying to keep her strength up. It was a stressful emotional moment born out of pure love and exhaustion. I spent weeks meticulously editing the footage, Kendra bragged, waving the drive in the air. I cut the audio perfectly. It looks exactly like you are violently abusing an elderly disabled woman. If you do not transfer $10 million into my account right this second, I will upload this video to every single media outlet in Atlanta. The public will absolutely crucify you. Your investors will abandon you. The city will boycott your housing projects. I will burn your reputation to the ground. Dolores suddenly stopped crying. She looked up at Kendra with a spark of vicious hope in her eyes. Yes, Dolores urged, wiping her face. Post it, Kendra. Show the world what a monster she is unless she pays us. I looked at my sister, realizing there was absolutely no line she would not cross for money. She was willing to frame me for elder abuse just to secure her fake luxury lifestyle. I crossed my arms and stared her down. I do not negotiate with terrorists, Kendra. I said, my voice cold and unyielding. Do whatever you want. Kendra let out a furious scream and pulled out her phone. She jammed the special USB drive into an adapter connected to her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen, tapping furiously as she drafted a malicious post on Twitter. She attached the heavily doctored video tagging every major news network and local politician in the city. With a violent, aggressive jab of her thumb, she hit upload. Within exactly 5 minutes, my corporate phone began to buzz wildly on the mahogany table. Then the office lines outside the boardroom started ringing in a chaotic chorus. My executive assistant rushed into the room looking completely panicked, holding a tablet. "Ma'am," my assistant said, her voice trembling. "A viral video was just posted online. It already has 50,000 views and is climbing rapidly. Several major investors are calling, demanding an immediate explanation. Our public relations team is saying we are facing a massive, catastrophic media crisis." Kendra threw her head back and laughed a triumphant evil sound as the notifications kept pouring in. She thought she had finally destroyed me. She thought she had won the war. But as the social media firestorm erupted around my company, she had no idea the deadly trap she had just walked right into. The aftermath of the viral upload was instantaneous and brutal. By the time my security team had escorted my gloating family out of the building, the doctored video had amassed over 1 million views across multiple platforms. Kendra had carefully engineered the footage to ensure maximum emotional damage. It showed me aggressively snatching a tray out of the frail hands of Nana Ruby while shouting at her. Without the actual context of me stopping my grandmother from eating food, she was highly allergic to it, looked exactly like elder abuse. My mother Dolores did not waste a single second capitalizing on the digital firestorm. By Tuesday morning, she and Warren had secured a primetime interview on one of the most watched daytime talk shows in Atlanta. I sat in my office watching the broadcast with Elias. Dolores wore a modest beige dress completely devoid of her usual flashy jewelry. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the heartbroken, devastated matriarch flawlessly. "I tried to save my mother-in-law," Dolores sobbed to the sympathetic host, her voice quivering perfectly. "We all did. But Nia isolated her from us. She manipulated a dying woman to steal her fortune, and as you can all see in that horrible video, she treated her with absolute cruelty. We just want justice for Nana Ruby." Warren sat beside her, looking somber and defeated. "We gave Nia everything," Warren added, looking directly into the camera. "We tried to guide her, but she became obsessed with money and power. It breaks my heart to see the monster my daughter has become." The public backlash was swift and merciless. My real estate holding company took a massive hit. Our stock prices plummeted by 15% before the market even closed on Wednesday. The phone lines at my corporate headquarters were completely jammed with angry calls from local citizens and community leaders. Preston, sensing blood in the water, immediately contacted every major tabloid and gossip blog in the city. He anonymously leaked fabricated stories about my allegedly ruthless business tactics, claiming I evicted low-income families and bribed city officials to secure my building permits. Several of my primary investors requested emergency meetings, threatening to pull their funding from my most important projects, including the affordable housing developments. My public relations team was in a state of absolute panic. They drafted dozens of press releases and begged me to go on camera to defend myself. They wanted me to release a detailed statement explaining the context of the video and condemning my family for their actions. I refused. I ordered my entire communications department to stand down and remain completely silent. "Do not engage with the media," I instructed them firmly. "Are you sure about this?" Nia Elias asked, sitting across from my desk as we watched another news segment dragging my name through the mud. "The court of public opinion is condemning you without a trial. Your reputation is taking a massive beating out there." "Let them talk," I replied, my voice perfectly calm as I signed another stack of legal documents. "Never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake, Elias. Right now, they feel invincible. They think they are controlling the narrative and backing me into a corner. But every single interview they give, every lie they publish, and every tear they fake on national television is just another nail in their own coffin." Elias smiled a sharp, predatory smile. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the finalized legal filings. The trap was fully set. While my family paraded themselves in front of the media, Elias and I had spent the last 96 hours working around the clock. We were not just preparing a simple defense, we were launching a massive federal lawsuit against Warren, Dolores, Kendra, and Preston for criminal defamation, extortion, and severe financial fraud. We had every piece of evidence meticulously organized and ready to deploy when the time was right. The silence from my camp only emboldened them further. Kendra tweeted nonstop, bragging about exposing the truth. Preston strutted around Atlanta acting like a crusader for justice. They truly believed my silence was an admission of guilt. They thought I was hiding in shame, too terrified to fight back. 2 weeks later, the highly anticipated civil trial finally opened at the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta. The building was completely swarmed by reporters, photographers, and aggressive protesters holding signs demanding justice for Nana Ruby. My security team had to form a tight perimeter just to get me and Elias through the front doors safely. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was incredibly tense. My family was already seated at the plaintiff table looking smug and victorious. Dolores wore another modest conservative outfit, playing the grieving victim to absolute perfection. Preston and Kendra whispered to each other, sharing arrogant smiles. They had brought an entire arsenal of fake witnesses to support their fabricated claims. I recognized 3 distant cousins who had not spoken to Nana Ruby in over a decade. Dolores had clearly bribed them with promises of a payout to testify against me. They sat in the front row looking nervous but ready to lie under oath. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense man with decades of experience, entered the room and banged his gavel. The courtroom fell silent immediately. He looked over the documents in front of him before turning his sharp gaze directly toward me. "Miss Washington," the judge said, his voice echoing clearly through the silent room. "Your family has presented a very disturbing piece of video evidence to this court. They claim this footage proves you actively engaged in the physical and emotional abuse of your late grandmother. The public outcry regarding this matter has been significant. Before we hear from the witnesses, I want you to address this specific piece of evidence. How do you explain the actions captured in this video?" Kendra smiled wickedly, waiting for my response now. Before I could speak, Preston stood up, acting the concerned gentleman. He addressed the judge with fake sorrow. "Your Honor," Preston said smoothly, "we have witnesses who can provide context to this tragedy before the defendant spins her lies." The judge allowed the witnesses to take the stand. First was Aunt Clara, a distant relative who had not visited in over a decade. Dolores had paid off her credit card debt for this performance. Clara gripped the stand, forcing tears down her face. She claimed she saw me deliberately withholding food from Nana Ruby. Clara swore under oath that I locked the nurses out and verbally abused the sick woman until she cried. Next, cousin Marcus wiped dry eyes and told a fabricated story about how Nana Ruby begged him to save her from my cruel treatment. Finally, Preston took the stand. He looked at the gallery, playing the noble savior of family honor. "When I married into this family, I thought I was joining a legacy of love." Preston lied. But Nia Washington is a dangerous predator. She isolated a vulnerable elderly woman and tortured her to secure a $40 million inheritance. We are here strictly to seek justice for a helpless grandmother who suffered unimaginable horrors at the hands of her own flesh and blood. Dolores sobbed loudly into her hands, right on cue. Kendra patted Preston on the back as he returned to his seat, looking like a hero. The courtroom murmured with absolute disgust, aimed directly at me. The judge banged his gavel to silence the gallery and turned his stern gaze back to me. "Well, Miss Washington," the judge demanded, "you have heard the testimonies. You have seen the viral video. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" I stood up from the defense table. I did not bring a legal team. I did not bring character witnesses to beg for mercy. I simply picked up a small silver external hard drive and walked confidently to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor," I said, my voice perfectly steady, "I do not need lawyers to cross-examine these paid actors. I do not need to deliver a passionate speech. I only need 3 minutes of your time and access to the court video projector. The judge frowned but motioned for the bailiff to take my hard drive. The bailiff plugged the device into the central evidence system. My sister Kendra intentionally uploaded a heavily edited 15-second clip to Twitter. I explained, turning to face my family. She deliberately cut the audio and manipulated the visual frame to create a false narrative. But she forgot one very important detail. I personally installed the security cameras in that VIP hospital suite to ensure my grandmother was safe around the clock. That means I own the original unedited high-definition master file. I nodded to the bailiff. Play the file. The massive screen on the courtroom wall flickered to life. The full wide-angle video began to play, displaying a crystal-clear timestamp in the corner. The courtroom watched in absolute silence as the truth finally unfolded. In the original video, I was not yelling at Nana Ruby out of anger. I was crying hysterically out of pure terror. The tray I violently snatched out of her frail hands was not her hospital dinner. It was a tray covered in dozens of unidentified heavy prescription pills. The restored audio track echoed loudly through the court speakers. "Nana, stop!" I was screaming in the video, batting the pills away from her mouth. "You cannot take these. The nurses did not authorize this medication." Then the camera angle shifted slightly, revealing a third person in the room who had been completely cropped out of the viral Twitter clip. It was Kendra. She was standing by the hospital bed looking panicked and guilty. "I just wanted her to sleep," Kendra argued in the video, trying to grab the tray back from me. "She is in pain, Nia. Just let her take the pills." "These are not painkillers, Kendra," I shouted back, holding my grandmother tight to protect her. "These are heavy sedatives. Her heart is failing. This dosage would instantly kill her. Are you trying to murder her?" The video ended abruptly, leaving the courtroom completely paralyzed in a state of absolute shock. The narrative had completely flipped in less than 3 minutes. I was not the monster starving a sick elderly woman. I was the protective granddaughter frantically fighting to save her life from a lethal overdose. Kendra went completely rigid, her face draining of all color. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning stark white. Dolores stopped her fake crying instantly, her mouth hanging open in sheer terror. Preston backed his chair away from his wife, looking like he wanted to bolt. The paid witnesses suddenly looked sick, realizing they had just committed severe perjury. The judge stared at the frozen screen, his jaw clenched tight with rising fury. He looked directly at Kendra, whose entire golden child facade had just been permanently incinerated. Before the judge could utter a single word, Elias Thorne stood up from the defense table. He buttoned his suit jacket with absolute authority and walked toward the center aisle. "Your Honor," Elias said, his deep voice cutting through the heavy silence. "The video you just watched is only the beginning of this heinous conspiracy. This was not a simple mistake regarding medication. This was a highly calculated and deliberate attempt on the life of Ruby Washington." Elias turned to face the judge, holding a formal legal request form. "To prove this intent, I request a secure live connection right now," Elias stated. "We must hear from the physician who treated Ruby Washington." The judge granted their request. A doctor appeared on screen, broadcasting live. "Dr. Evans," Elias said, "please present the report." The courtroom screen shifted focus to Dr. Evans. He sat in his pristine medical office, holding a thick file of medical records. Elias Thorne addressed the doctor. "Dr. Evans, please explain exactly what you found in the blood samples taken from Ruby Washington on the night of that video recording." Dr. Evans looked directly into the camera. "When Miss Washington alerted my medical team to the pills, we immediately ran a full toxicology screen. The pills Kendra attempted to give her grandmother were not standard hospital issue. They were a high dosage of a restricted cardiovascular sedative. Given the severe heart condition of the patient, ingesting even one of those pills would have triggered fatal cardiac arrest. It would have looked like a natural heart attack to an untrained eye." The entire courtroom erupted into a frenzy of shocked gasps. The press gallery furiously typed on their laptops, realizing they were no longer covering a simple family dispute. They were covering an attempted homicide. Kendra turned the color of chalk. The golden child who had swaggered into the courtroom with an arrogant smirk now looked like a cornered animal. She gripped the edge of the plaintiff table, her hands trembling violently. "I did not know," she stammered, her voice cracking with pure panic. "I thought they were just her regular vitamins." The nurse handed them to me. I was just trying to help her. Dr. Evans shook his head. "That is impossible. Those specific sedatives are never kept on that hospital floor. They were brought in from the outside." The serial numbers on the pill bottle traced back to a private pharmacy across town, filled under a prescription written for Preston. Preston jumped out of his chair. He threw his hands up in the air, violently shaking his head. "I have absolutely nothing to do with this," he shouted, throwing his new wife entirely under the bus. "My prescription pad was stolen. I never gave her those pills. She acted completely alone." Kendra stared at her husband in absolute horror. The man she had conspired with was abandoning her the second the ship began to sink. "You coward," Kendra shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Preston. "You told me it would be untraceable. You said we needed her $40 million before your loan sharks found us." "Order," the judge roared, slamming his gavel repeatedly against the heavy wooden block. "I will clear this entire courtroom if you cannot control yourselves." Dolores could not accept the complete destruction of her perfect elite family narrative. She leaped up from her seat, pointing wildly at the screen, and then at me. "This is a complete setup," Dolores screamed, her face twisting with desperate fury. "Nia paid off this doctor. She bought his testimony with her dirty real estate money. She is framing my beautiful daughter to steal the spotlight. You are all falling for the lies of a jealous college dropout." The judge glared down at my mother with absolute zero tolerance. "One more word out of you, Mom, and you will spend the rest of this trial in a holding cell for contempt of court. Sit down immediately." Warren yanked Dolores back into her chair, but the damage was done. They were completely exposed. Their pristine high society masks had melted away, revealing the greedy, desperate criminals underneath. They were out of plays. They were out of lies. But Elias Thorne was not finished. He buttoned his suit jacket and walked slowly toward the judge, holding a small digital audio recorder. "Your Honor," Elias said, his deep voice commanding the absolute attention of every single person in the room. "The medical evidence clearly proves the malicious intent of Kendra and Preston. But to fully understand the depth of this depravity, we must hear from the victim herself. 2 days before Ruby Washington passed away, she knew her family was closing in like vultures. She knew they would stop at nothing to get her money. So she asked me to secretly record a final statement." Elias turned to face my parents. Dolores and Warren shrank back in their seats, terrified of what was coming next. "She instructed me to lock this audio file in my most secure vault," Elias continued. "She told me to only play it if her son and daughter-in-law ever dared to take Nia to court. They have crossed that line today. The court must hear her final words." The judge nodded, gesturing for Elias to proceed. Elias connected the small digital recorder to the courtroom audio system. He pressed play. For a second, there was only the soft static of a recording. Then the voice of Nana Ruby echoed through the massive courtroom. It was weak and rasping heavily from her failing lungs, but it carried the undeniable, unbreakable authority of a matriarch who had survived decades of struggle. "If you are hearing this tape," Nana Ruby said through the speakers, "it means my greedy son Warren and his vile wife Dolores are trying to destroy the only good thing that ever came out of their toxic household. It means they are trying to ruin Nia." The sound of her voice hit Warren like a physical blow. He slumped forward, resting his forehead against the cold wooden table. Dolores squeezed her eyes shut, shaking uncontrollably as the voice of the woman she tormented filled the silent room. "I am recording this because I know exactly what they are, Nana." Ruby continued, her voice gaining a fierce, steady strength. "I know Dolores and Warren stole my surgery money to buy luxury cars. I know Preston is a broke fraud using my granddaughter. And I know Kendra tried to slip me poison disguised as medicine to speed up my death. I saw her swap the pills. I saw the pure greed in her eyes. The only reason I am still breathing to record this message is because Nia stood between me and them. Nia actually saved my life." The voice of Nana Ruby echoed through the massive courtroom, carrying an undeniable weight that paralyzed everyone sitting at the plaintiff table. She took a slow, labored breath on the recording before continuing her final testament. "I know exactly what my son Warren and his wife Dolores have done. she stated, her tone laced with absolute disgust. They stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from my personal accounts. They siphoned my emergency medical funds so they could parade around Buckhead throwing lavish parties and pretending to be the ultimate pinnacle of black excellence. They left me to rot in this hospital bed while they took luxury vacations to Dubai. The press gallery frantically typed every single word. Warren buried his face in his hands, trembling violently, as his mother exposed his darkest sins to the entire city. Dolores sat completely frozen, staring blankly at the digital recorder as if it were a loaded weapon. And then there is Kendra Nana. Ruby continued, coughing weakly into the microphone. My beautiful golden granddaughter, who came into my room wearing a designer dress paid for with my stolen money. She thought I was asleep when she swapped my heart medication for those lethal sedatives. She wanted me dead so she could finally claim her massive inheritance and fund her fake high society wedding. But she failed because of Nia. Kendra let out a pathetic whimper, shrinking back into her chair as the eyes of the entire courtroom turned toward her with pure visceral hatred. Nia is the only reason I survived as long as I did. Nana Ruby declared, her voice suddenly ringing with fierce pride. While Dolores and Warren were drinking expensive champagne overseas, Nia was working 3 exhausting jobs just to keep the lights on. My youngest granddaughter actually starved herself for weeks, skipping meals just so she could afford to buy the prescription medications my insurance refused to cover. She sat by my bedside every single night, holding my hand while the rest of this greedy family plotted my funeral. I felt a tight knot form in my throat. Hearing her voice defend me from beyond the grave was the most powerful validation I had ever experienced. I am leaving this recording with Elias Thorne for one specific reason, Nana Ruby concluded, her voice growing remarkably stern and unforgiving. I know Warren and Dolores. I know their boundless greed. If they ever dare to drag Nia into a courtroom to challenge my final will, I command the legal system to use this tape to lock them all away. They are thieves and they are murderers. Give Nia everything and give them the prison sentences they absolutely deserve. The recording ended with a sharp, definitive click. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. No one dared to speak. No one dared to breathe. The fake witnesses Dolores had bribed were visibly shaking in their seats, terrified of the massive perjury charges they were now facing. The judge sat high on his bench, his face completely flushed with righteous fury. He looked down at the plaintiff table with an expression of absolute profound disgust. He picked up his wooden gavel and slammed it down so hard the sound cracked like a gunshot across the room. This court has heard enough, the judge roared, his voice booming with unquestionable authority. The malicious, frivolous, and utterly fabricated charges of elder abuse brought against Nia Washington are dismissed immediately and with extreme prejudice. He pointed a sharp, accusatory finger directly at my parents. Warren and Dolores Washington, the judge, continued, his tone deadly and absolute. I am ordering your immediate detainment. Bailiffs place them under arrest for severe financial fraud, grand larceny, and the gross exploitation of a vulnerable elderly citizen, and place Kendra Washington under immediate arrest for the attempted murder of Ruby Washington and severe felony perjury. The courtroom exploded into absolute chaos. The gallery erupted in shouts and loud gasps as heavily armed court bailiffs and police officers rushed the plaintiff table. Dolores started screaming hysterically, thrashing her arms, as an officer forcefully pulled her out of her chair and slapped heavy metal handcuffs around her wrists. Warren did not even try to fight back. He simply held his hands out, staring blankly at the floor as the cold steel locked around his wrists. His fake wealthy empire was officially reduced to nothing but a pair of handcuffs and a criminal record. Kendra completely lost her mind. She sobbed violently, begging the officers to let her go, claiming she was too beautiful and too important to go to prison. The officers ignored her pathetic cries, hauling her up roughly and reading her the Miranda rights. Amidst the wild, chaotic scene of my family being aggressively detained, I noticed something happening out of the corner of my eye. Preston, the arrogant white man who loved to brag about his fake old money lineage, was slowly pushing his chair back. While the police were completely occupied with wrestling Kendra and Dolores into submission, Preston quietly stood up. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. He was silently inching his way toward the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom, desperate to escape the massive sinking ship he had married into. I stood up from the defense table and locked my eyes directly on the exit. I caught the attention of the two massive police officers guarding the back of the room. I gave them a sharp, definitive nod. Just as Preston reached his hand out to push the wooden doors open, the two heavily armed officers stepped directly into his path, blocking his only exit. Preston panicked. His entire face turned bright red as he puffed out his chest, trying to summon that fake elite authority one last time. "Get out of my way!" Preston shouted wildly, shoving his hand into his tailored suit jacket. "I have absolute diplomatic immunity. Nobody here can ever legally touch me now." Preston held the small blue passport high above his head, as if it were a magical shield that made him invincible. He puffed out his chest, adjusting his expensive tailored suit jacket with his free hand. He looked at the two heavily armed police officers blocking the courtroom doors with pure condescension. "I said step aside," Preston demanded, his voice dripping with absolute elitist arrogance. "This is a Class A diplomatic passport issued by the sovereign government of St. Kitts. My family has operated massive offshore accounts and maintained deep political connections in the Caribbean for 3 generations. You local city cops have absolutely no jurisdiction over a registered foreign diplomat. If you lay a single finger on me, you will trigger an international incident, and I will personally see to it that you lose your miserable little pensions." The officers hesitated for a fraction of a second, glancing toward the judge. Preston took that slight hesitation as a massive victory. He let out a loud, arrogant bark of laughter. "You honestly thought you could trap me in this pathetic courtroom drama?" Preston sneered, looking back over his shoulder at me. He patted a heavily bulging leather satchel slung across his shoulder. "I am leaving this miserable city today, and I am taking the $3 million worth of wedding diamonds safely packed in this bag to fund my new life on a private beach." Kendra, who was still pinned against the plaintiff table by a female bailiff, stopped sobbing and stared at her husband in pure horror. "You packed my bridal jewelry?" Kendra shrieked, her voice cracking with sheer hysteria. "You told me you were going to the restroom. You were going to leave me here to go to prison and run away with my diamonds." Preston did not even look at her. "You are a broke liability, Kendra," he spat coldly. "I am a survivor." I stepped out from behind the defense table, holding a thick manila folder. I walked slowly down the center aisle of the courtroom, the sharp click of my heels echoing in the heavy silence. I stopped exactly 2 feet away from Preston. He glared down at me, clutching his little blue passport like a lifeline. "I am afraid your island vacation has been permanently canceled, Preston," I said, my voice perfectly calm and even. I raised the manila folder and forcefully slapped it directly against his chest. He fumbled to catch it, dropping his leather satchel in the process. "You really should be more careful about the shady offshore organizations you wire your remaining cash to," I explained, watching the arrogant smirk finally slide off his face. "You paid a Caribbean money laundering syndicate $2 million for that fake diplomatic status. But you failed to realize that my corporate security and technology firm aggressively acquired that exact same syndicate last month to expand our international cybersecurity division." Preston looked down at the documents spilling out of the folder. They were highly classified internal transaction records from the exact offshore firm he had used. They detailed his massive wire transfers and explicitly flagged his passport as a completely fraudulent novelty document. "Your little blue book is nothing but a worthless piece of cheap cardboard," I announced loudly, ensuring the judge and the press gallery heard every single word. "You are not a foreign diplomat, Preston. You are just a broke, desperate criminal trying to flee the country with stolen jewelry and fake identification." The two police officers did not hesitate this time. The larger officer grabbed Preston by the shoulder, spinning him around and forcefully slamming him against the heavy wooden doors. Preston screamed in panic, dropping the fake passport as the cold steel handcuffs clicked tightly around his wrists. "You are under arrest for the use of fraudulent federal documents, severe tax evasion, and grand larceny," the officer barked, reading him his rights. Preston sobbed uncontrollably, begging the officers to let him go, claiming he was old money and did not belong in a dirty jail cell. Kendra watched her supposedly elite husband crying like a pathetic child as he was aggressively dragged out of the courtroom. She lost her mind completely. "You absolute coward," Kendra screamed at the top of her lungs, thrashing wildly against the bailiffs. "I hope you rot in a concrete cell. You ruined my life." The judge banged his gavel fiercely, demanding order, as the police successfully hauled Warren, Dolores, and Kendra out of the courtroom to be processed into the county jail. Elias Thorne stood beside me, clapping his hand firmly on my shoulder. It was a complete and total victory. The toxic family that had tormented me for decades was finally stripped of their fake wealth, their stolen assets, and their precious social status. They were facing years in federal prison. It truly felt like the nightmare was permanently over, and I could finally begin living my life in absolute peace. But I severely underestimated the vindictive, unhinged desperation of a fallen golden child. 2 days later, a corrupt family friend of Dolores managed to scrape together just enough cash to post a massive bail bond for Kendra. While Warren and Dolores remained locked away awaiting trial, Kendra was temporarily released back onto the streets of Atlanta. She had absolutely no money, no home, and no future left to lose. Her mind became completely consumed by a dark, violent obsession with destroying me. Instead of preparing a legal defense or fleeing the city, Kendra used her last remaining favor to contact a disgraced city inspector. Through him, she managed to secretly steal the highly classified electrical blueprints for Ruby Haven. That was my massive affordable housing project and the absolute crown jewel of my real estate empire. Kendra sat in a cheap motel room staring at the blueprints with pure malice. She decided that if she was going to burn, she was going to take my entire legacy down in the flames with her today. Kendra sat on a stained mattress in a motel room on the outskirts of Atlanta. She stared with bloodshot eyes at stolen electrical blueprints spread across the cheap table. Her life of luxury had been incinerated in a courtroom session. Her fake husband was going to federal prison. Her manipulative parents were locked away awaiting sentencing. Out on a bail bond secured by a corrupt associate, she knew she had nothing left to lose. She traced her fingernail over the detailed schematic for the central control room of Ruby Haven. This was the high-end, affordable housing project Nia built specifically for the low-income Black community. Kendra felt a sickening wave of pure venom rise in her chest. She was not going to let her younger sister win the public relations war. If Kendra was going to spend the rest of her natural life behind bars, she would make certain the precious legacy of Nia burned straight to the ground first. She grabbed 2 plastic jerry cans filled with premium gasoline and a specialized short-circuiting device purchased on the dark web. She loaded the deadly supplies into a stolen rental car and drove recklessly into the dark, stormy night. The construction site of Ruby Haven loomed against the glittering Atlanta skyline. It was a sprawling, modern complex scheduled for a highly publicized ribbon-cutting ceremony by the mayor this weekend. Kendra parked the stolen car 2 blocks away and slipped quietly through a hidden gap in the temporary chain-link fencing. The heavy southern rain masked the sound of her footsteps as she lugged the jerry cans across the muddy ground. According to the stolen architectural blueprints, the central control room was located deep in the primary basement level of the main residential tower. She easily bypassed the outer security gate using a master access code she had paid a disgraced city inspector to acquire. She felt a surge of arrogant triumph. Nia might be a billionaire real estate mogul now, but she was still stupid enough to leave her infrastructure exposed to a targeted attack. Kendra navigated the dark concrete corridors using only a small tactical penlight. Her heart pounded aggressively with malicious anticipation. She reached the heavy steel door of the central control room. She punched the access code into the keypad, and the heavy metal door clicked open. Kendra stepped inside the room. Giant racks of expensive servers, heavy electrical panels, and advanced building management systems lined the concrete walls. This was the brain of the Ruby Haven complex. She set the jerry cans down and pulled out the short-circuit device. Her plan was diabolical and perfectly calculated to inflict maximum devastation. She would attach the device directly to the primary electrical mainframe, causing a massive uncontained power surge. Then she would douse the enclosed room in gasoline. When the surge eventually ignited the highly flammable fuel, the explosion would gut the foundational structure of the main residential tower. It would look exactly like severe gross negligence and catastrophic faulty wiring by the developers. The city council would condemn the building immediately. Nia would face federal investigations for negligent construction, and her business reputation would be permanently destroyed. Kendra laughed, a dark, unhinged sound that echoed sharply off the cold concrete walls. She unscrewed the tight caps of the jerry cans and began splashing the gasoline everywhere. She soaked the server racks, the heavy electrical panels, and the floor, pooling the flammable liquid directly under the main power grid. The toxic stench of fuel filled the enclosed space, making her eyes water violently, but she did not care. She tossed the empty plastic cans aside and pulled a silver lighter from her jacket pocket. She attached the short-circuit device to the main breaker box, setting the digital timer for 2 minutes, giving herself just enough time to escape the blast radius. "This is for ruining my perfect wedding," Kendra hissed into the empty room. She forcefully flicked the silver lighter. A bright orange flame sparked to life, illuminating her twisted manic smile. The fuel ignited instantly. A wall of bright hot fire erupted, sending thick black smoke billowing toward the ceiling. Kendra turned around, ready to sprint down the dark hallway and watch her sister lose everything. But before she could take a single step toward freedom, a loud mechanical alarm blared through the control room. The heavy steel door she had just walked through violently slammed shut with a terrifying metallic crash. Kendra rushed to the door, yanking on the handle. It was locked. The digital access keypad had gone completely dead. Before the sheer panic could even fully register in her brain, the ceiling vents snapped open. A concentrated blast of specialized fire suppression gas sprayed forcefully down into the room. It was a chemical agent designed to instantly eliminate oxygen from the fire without harming the electrical equipment. Within 3 seconds, the roaring flames were suffocated, leaving the room pitch black and entirely filled with a thick white chemical fog. Kendra coughed violently, dropping heavily to her knees in the absolute darkness. She blindly pounded her fists against the unyielding solid steel door, screaming desperately for help. She was trapped inside a toxic basement with no way out. Suddenly, the room was bathed in a stark, blinding red light. High in the 4 corners of the concrete ceiling, 4 advanced infrared security cameras had quickly rotated downward. Their glowing red lenses were pointed directly at her, capturing her every single panicked movement in high definition. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the cold concrete wall. Then a massive flat-screen monitor mounted directly above the main server rack powered on with a sharp digital hum. The bright screen fully illuminated the fog-filled room. Kendra stared at the massive monitor, her blood running freezing cold in her veins. It showed the immaculate interior of a luxurious high-rise penthouse office. Sitting comfortably behind a sleek glass desk, looking directly into the camera lens, with an expression of pure, absolute ice, was Nia. Nia leaned forward, resting her elbows perfectly on her pristine glass desk. She did not look angry. She looked completely bored, as if she were watching a mildly entertaining television show. "Did you honestly think I did not know you paid off that disgraced city inspector, Kendra?" My voice echoed smoothly through the high-fidelity speakers mounted in the concrete ceiling. "You always believed you were the smartest person in the room simply because Mother told you that you were. But you have always been exceptionally predictable. When my corporate security team flagged the unauthorized access to our digital archives, I knew exactly who was snooping around. So I made sure the inspector found exactly what you wanted him to find." Kendra coughed violently, waving her hands to clear the thick white chemical fog away from her burning eyes. "What did you do?" Kendra shrieked, slamming her fists against the heavy steel door. "Let me out of here, you psychotic freak!" "I am afraid I cannot do that," Nia replied, taking a slow sip from a crystal water glass. You see, the architectural blueprints you paid $10,000 to steal were completely fabricated. I had my engineering team specifically draft them for a decoy basement located in a condemned commercial property. The actual Ruby Haven project, the real multi-million-dollar development, is safely secured 2 full blocks away from your current location. You just broke into an empty concrete shell completely wired with high-definition cameras and advanced fire suppression traps specifically designed to catch domestic terrorists like yourself. Kendra stared at the massive digital monitor, her jaw dropping in absolute, unadulterated horror. The realization of her monumental failure crashed down on her, shattering the last remaining fragments of her arrogant golden child persona. She had played right into my hands. She had literally locked herself inside a federal crime scene with her own fingerprints, covering the stolen rental car, the plastic jerry cans, and the illegal short-circuiting device. "You cannot do this to your own flesh and blood," Kendra wailed, sliding down the cold steel door until she was sitting on the damp concrete floor. "I am your sister Nia. Please open the door. I will leave Atlanta. I will never bother you again. I am not holding you hostage." Kendra. Nia stated, her voice devoid of any familial warmth. "The local authorities are currently handling your exit strategy." Right on cue, the deafening wail of emergency sirens pierced through the stormy Atlanta night. Heavy, flashing red and blue lights illuminated the small, frosted glass window at the top of the steel door. Kendra scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Heavy combat boots pounded down the concrete hallway outside. A squad of heavily armed tactical police officers flanked by the Atlanta Fire Rescue Department surrounded the room. The digital lock clicked open, remotely controlled by Nia from her penthouse office. The heavy steel door swung wide open. "Do not move a single muscle," an officer roared, pointing a high-powered flashlight directly into the face of my sister. "Get on the ground right now." Kendra did not fight them. She dropped to the wet concrete, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of her utter defeat. The officers aggressively wrenched her arms behind her back, securing the cold metal handcuffs tightly around her wrists. They dragged her out of the fog-filled decoy room, hauling her past the empty plastic gasoline containers and the seized short-circuiting device. Local news vans were already swarming the perimeter of the construction site, their bright camera lights capturing every single humiliating second of the arrest of the former high society bride. The booking process at the Fulton County Jail was a grueling, miserable reality check for a woman who had spent her entire life wrapped in luxury and extreme privilege. Kendra was stripped of her ruined designer clothing and forced into a scratchy, bright orange prison jumpsuit. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and aggressively processed as a highly dangerous domestic terrorist. There would be absolutely no special treatment today. There were no corrupt family friends left to bribe the judges or secure a massive bail bond. Her crimes involved premeditated arson, the attempted destruction of a federal housing project, and severe endangerment of public safety. When she was finally dragged before the magistrate judge for her emergency arraignment hearing, the verdict was swift and entirely merciless. Given the extreme flight risk and the highly violent nature of her premeditated crimes, the judge denied bail completely. The gavel slammed down, sealing her immediate fate. Kendra was not sent to a standard holding cell with other inmates. Because she was deemed a severe threat, she was escorted deep into the maximum security wing of the detention center. The guards shoved her into a tiny windowless solitary confinement cell. The heavy iron door clanged shut with a terrifying sense of absolute finality. The golden child of the Washington family was finally locked away in a cold concrete cage, completely stripped of her money, her fake prestige, and her stolen power. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the sprawling county detention center, Dolores and Warren were sitting miserably in a temporary holding area, awaiting their own impending financial fraud trials. They were dressed in matching faded gray facility uniforms, their faces gaunt and exhausted. The loud communal television mounted high on the cinderblock wall was broadcasting the morning local news. Warren stared blankly at the floor, but Dolores glanced up at the screen. The breaking news ticker immediately caught her attention. The news anchor detailed the dramatic midnight arrest of Kendra attempting to firebomb a charity housing development. The screen flashed a high-definition mugshot of her golden child. Her hair was matted, and her eyes looked wild. Dolores fell to her knees, weeping hysterically against the iron bars. "I need to make a phone call," she begged. "I must tell Nia the truth about her real father." The Fulton County Detention Center was a harsh contrast to the glittering chandeliers of the Grand Buckhead. The walls were painted a sickly institutional gray, and the air smelled heavily of industrial bleach, mixed with stale desperation. I sat quietly in the sterile visitation room, waiting on the hard metal chair. I wore a tailored crimson power suit, a subtle but deliberate reminder of the massive empire I commanded outside these reinforced concrete walls. The heavy steel door on the opposite side of the thick plexiglass partition buzzed loudly. A female guard escorted a prisoner into the tiny booth. It took my brain a fraction of a second to fully register that the broken woman shuffling toward the glass was actually my mother. Dolores Washington, the self-proclaimed Queen of Atlanta. High society was entirely unrecognizable. She wore a baggy, faded orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her shrinking frame. Her perfectly styled hair was now a tangled, brittle mess. Without her expensive foundation and designer lashes, her face looked hollow and deeply etched with pure exhaustion. She picked up the black plastic telephone receiver with trembling hands. I picked up mine, waiting for her to speak. "Nia, please!" Dolores begged, her voice cracking instantly. Her eyes were bloodshot and completely wild with panic. "You have to stop this. You have to call your powerful lawyers and drop the federal arson charges against Kendra. She is not built for this place, Nia. They have her locked in maximum security solitary confinement. She cries all day and night. She is going to lose her mind in there." I stared at the woman who had birthed me, feeling absolutely no sympathy. She tried to burn down an affordable housing project built for our community. I replied, my voice perfectly, even, and entirely devoid of emotion. She brought gasoline and an explosive device into a federal building. Kendra made her own bed, Dolores. Now she gets to sleep in it for a very long time. Dolores pressed her forehead against the thick, scratched plexiglass, sobbing violently. "You cannot do this to your own flesh and blood," she wailed, slamming her palm against the partition. "We are your family. I gave you life. You owe me a sliver of mercy." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Mercy is a privilege reserved for people who actually show remorse, Dolores. You are not sorry for what you did to Nana Ruby. You are not sorry for treating me like garbage for 30 years. You are only sorry that you finally got caught and lost your fake wealth." Dolores stopped crying abruptly. She looked up at me, her hollow eyes darting around the small visitation booth as if searching for a hidden escape route. When she realized there was no way out, she shifted to her final desperate tactic. She decided to play the ultimate victim. "I was hard on you because I had to be," Dolores whispered, her voice dropping to a harsh, desperate rasp. "I treated you differently because every single time I looked at your face, I saw him. I saw the massive mistake I made." I narrowed my eyes, gripping the heavy plastic receiver tighter. "Saw who I demanded. Warren is not your biological father." Dolores confessed, the dark, heavy secret finally spilling from her lips after 3 decades. The words hung in the stale prison air like a toxic cloud. I froze, completely blindsided by the revelation. "Your real father was a man named Marcus Dolores," continued, tears of genuine regret mixing with her manipulative performance. "He was a brilliant, kind, and deeply honest man. He loved me with his entire soul. But he was a struggling mechanic. He had calloused hands and absolutely no money. I was young and terrified of living a life in poverty. When I met Warren, he offered me the luxury cars and the social status I craved. So I abandoned Marcus to marry into the Washington family. I was already pregnant." Dolores pressed her hand against the glass, staring at me with a pathetic, desperate hunger. "You grew up looking exactly like Marcus." she cried, her voice breaking. You had his quiet resilience, his stubborn honesty, and his refusal to bend to high society rules. Every time you smiled or showed genuine compassion, it was like a knife twisting in my gut. You were a walking, breathing reminder of the good man I threw away for money. I hated you because you reminded me of my own shallow failure. I punished you because I could not punish myself. So please, Nia, have the same kind, forgiving heart your father had. Show me the mercy I did not show him. Save your sister. The silence in the visitation room was heavy and profound. Dolores looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, genuinely believing her emotional confession would shatter my resolve. She thought playing the tragic, regretful mother would finally manipulate me into saving her precious golden child. I processed the massive revelation about my true parentage. It explained so much about the deep, visceral hatred Warren and Dolores harbored toward me. But it changed nothing. I slowly leaned forward, bringing my face inches from the plexiglass. You are telling me this hoping I will feel pity for you? I said, my voice dropping to a deadly, freezing whisper. You think comparing me to a kind, heartbroken man will make me weak enough to drop the charges? I am sorry to disappoint you, Dolores. I am absolutely nothing like the poor man you abandoned. I do not forgive easily. You might have given birth to me, but Nana Ruby actually raised my spirit. I am an exact replica of her. I am incredibly strong, ruthless to my enemies, and fiercely loyal only to the truth. Nana Ruby never forgave murderers. Neither will I. I stood replacing the receiver. I walked out of the prison into the sunlight. The official sentencing trial takes place next week. The official sentencing trial took place the following week on a bright Tuesday morning. The federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta was completely swarmed. News vans blocked the surrounding streets and aggressive reporters pushed against the heavy metal barricades. The front pages of every single major local and national publication featured the absolute catastrophic downfall of my toxic family. The bold printed headlines were extremely brutal and entirely unforgiving. The fake elite empire of Warren and Dolores Washington was exposed for the entire world to see. Lengthy investigative articles detailed exactly how they had secretly funded their lavish country club lifestyles with stolen medical funds and highly fraudulent bank loans. Preston was featured in a massive front-page exposé outlining his multi-million-dollar offshore gambling debts and his desperate fake diplomatic passport stunt. The fake, flawless image of black excellence they had repeatedly used to look down on everyone else, including me, was permanently shattered. They were no longer the prestigious, untouchable socialites of Buckhead. They were just common broken criminals anxiously waiting to receive their federal prison numbers. I walked confidently through the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom, flanked tightly by Elias Thorne and my private security team. The spacious viewing gallery was packed to absolute maximum capacity. The stern judge took his elevated seat at the high bench, looking down at my family with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. Dolores, Warren, and Kendra sat silently at the defense table wearing matching faded orange prison jumpsuits. Preston was completely absent from the crowded room. He had already been officially extradited to a different state early that morning to face an avalanche of federal wire fraud and grand larceny charges. He would be spending decades locked away in a maximum security facility. The judge banged his heavy wooden gavel to silence the loudly murmuring crowd. He did not mince his words. He aggressively condemned my parents for their sheer, relentless greed and their utter lack of basic human morality. Warren and Dolores. Washington, the judge, announced, his voice booming across the silent room. I sentence you both to 5 solid years in federal prison, without the possibility of early parole for severe financial fraud and the grand theft of highly vulnerable assets. Dolores let out a loud, pathetic, sobbing wail, but the judge completely ignored her theatrical tears. He turned his harsh, uncompromising gaze directly toward my sister. Kendra Washington, you maliciously attempted to murder a sick, elderly woman, you aggressively extorted your own family, and you committed premeditated arson against a federal housing project. I sentence you to 8 years in a high-security federal penitentiary. Kendra immediately collapsed against the cold wooden table, sobbing violently, as the heavy, crushing reality of her permanently ruined life finally broke her arrogant spirit. But the lengthy prison sentences were only the first part of their absolute ruin. I had explicitly instructed Elias to file a massive civil suit alongside the criminal charges to ensure they could never rebuild their fake high society lives again. Elias stood up tall and presented the finalized civil damages agreement directly to the judge. Your Honor, my client has secured a strict civil restitution mandate, Elias stated firmly. Warren Dolores and Kendra Washington are legally bound to entirely repay the $15 million corporate debt they attempted to fraudulently pin on Nia Washington. Since all their personal luxury assets have been permanently seized by federal agents, they will be required to perform highly supervised manual labor upon their eventual release from prison. Their minimum wages will be automatically garnished by the state to repay their massive debts to my client. The judge signed the civil order immediately without any hesitation. When my family eventually finished serving their miserable prison sentences, they would not be returning to luxury mansions or expensive designer shopping sprees. They would be aggressively forced to work grueling minimum wage jobs to pay me back for the rest of their natural lives. The armed bailiffs stepped forward, grabbing my parents and my sister roughly by the arms. They dragged them out of the courtroom to begin serving their hard time. I did not look back. 5 completely peaceful and highly profitable years quickly passed since that definitive courtroom victory. My real estate holding company expanded massively, completely, transforming the entire city skyline. Ruby Haven opened to massive public acclaim, providing beautiful, affordable luxury homes to thousands of deserving, hardworking families. I was sitting comfortably at a private corner table inside the most exclusive 5-star restaurant located directly in the main lobby of my premier luxury hotel in Buckhead. I was quietly reviewing some detailed architectural blueprints while enjoying a fresh morning espresso. Across the immaculate, sprawling dining room, a newly hired janitorial worker pushed a heavy yellow mop bucket over the gleaming, polished marble floors. She wore a stained, ill-fitting gray uniform, moving very sluggishly as she desperately scrubbed a stubborn black scuff mark near the grand entrance. A wealthy, impatient hotel guest accidentally bumped hard into her, violently knocking the wet mop right out of her calloused hands. "Watch exactly where you are going, you clumsy fool," the angry guest snapped harshly. The tired janitor scrambled quickly to pick up the heavy mop, apologizing profusely in a meek, broken, terrified whisper. She slowly looked up from the floor, gazing directly toward my secluded corner table. The heavy, deep wrinkles and profound exhaustion could not mask her familiar facial features. It was my mother. She stared at me, clutching the dirty mop handle, her eyes widening in pure, absolute shock as she finally realized who owned the magnificent building she was currently scrubbing. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, dropping the mop again. The wealthy guest yelled again, aggressively demanding she move out of his way. My mother quickly lowered her head, her shoulders shaking as she quietly obeyed his harsh, unforgiving command. She looked utterly defeated, humiliated, and completely broken. She was exactly where she always truly belonged now. While my mother scrubbed floors at my hotel, the golden child faced an entirely different absolute hell. Far away from Buckhead sat the sprawling County Industrial Recycling Center, where financial offenders worked off their civil restitutions. The suffocating summer heat beat down relentlessly, baking the mountains of jagged metal and toxic plastic waste. Kendra was currently standing knee-deep in rotting industrial garbage. She wore a stained canvas jumpsuit soaked completely through with foul-smelling sweat. Thick rubber gloves could not stop the sharp edges of broken glass from constantly bruising her fingers. Her previously flawless skin was sunburned and streaked with dark, toxic soot. She was sorting heavy scrap metal under the unyielding eyes of armed facility guards. There were no country club luncheons here. There was only the brutal reality of manual labor and the crushing weight of a $15 million debt she would be paying off for life. The heavy machinery dialed down as the iron gates slowly cranked open. A fleet of black luxury vehicles rolled onto the dusty gravel lot. At the center was an immaculate Rolls-Royce. The guards stood at attention knowing who was arriving. I had explicitly structured the Nana Ruby Foundation to provide funding for this specific facility, giving me absolute unrestricted access to inspect the grounds whenever I pleased. The driver opened the door, and I stepped out into the blazing southern heat wearing a sharp crimson business suit that radiated pure authority. A team of facility directors immediately flanked me with clipboards to offer their status reports. I walked slowly across the dusty yard, my heels clicking sharply against the concrete. I projected unbothered confidence, a self-made billionaire inspecting her philanthropic investments. As my team rounded the corner, I stopped near the heavy scrap metal division. Kendra was violently struggling to lift a tangled bundle of copper wiring. Her chest heaved with exhaustion, and she let out a pathetic gasp as the wire slipped from her weak grip, crashing onto the dusty concrete. The loud noise caused her to flinch and turn around. Her bloodshot, exhausted eyes locked directly onto mine. For a fraction of a second, the arrogant, entitled sister wanted to scream and demand attention. But the brutal reality of her ruined life instantly crushed that impulse. She looked at my pristine crimson suit and the entourage hanging onto my every word. Then she looked down at her stained canvas uniform and her bruised, trembling hands. The crushing weight of her irreversible humiliation folded her in half. Kendra dropped her gaze to the dirty concrete, completely unable to maintain eye contact. She shrank back against a mountain of rusted metal, desperately trying to make herself invisible. She did not dare to utter a single pathetic word. She expected me to walk over and gloat. She expected me to point and laugh at her misery just like she had laughed at me. But I did absolutely nothing of the sort. I did not hurl a single cruel insult. I did not even grant her a second glance. I simply turned my head back to the facility director and continued discussing funding. I glided past my sister as if she were completely invisible, as if she were nothing more than an anonymous piece of industrial machinery. That absolute total indifference was the most devastating punishment I could have possibly inflicted. For a narcissist who demanded to be the center of attention, being completely ignored was infinitely worse than the physical labor itself. She was no longer the golden child. She was just another anonymous worker paying off a debt she could never escape. I finished my inspection tour and returned to the cool, quiet luxury of my vehicle, completely leaving Kendra behind in the toxic dust. My life was moving forward at blinding speed, while my toxic family remained permanently trapped in the miserable hell of their own creation. Back in the heart of the city, the reality of that hell was playing out in the grandest hotel in Buckhead. Dolores and Warren were currently dressed in matching drab housekeeping uniforms, pushing a heavy wooden housekeeping cart down the plush, carpeted hallway of my flagship property. They were exhausted, their bodies aching from scrubbing luxury suites they used to rent for themselves. They knocked tentatively on the door of the presidential suite, holding fresh towels and cleaning supplies. The heavy door swung open, revealing a wealthy, furious hotel guest, holding a ruined designer silk shirt. The guest had accidentally spilled a glass of dark red wine all over himself, but he was looking for a convenient target to blame. "You incompetent, lazy fools!" the guest roared at my parents aggressively, throwing the stained shirt directly into the face of my mother. "You call this luxury service? You are nothing but useless, bottom-feeding trash, ruining my perfect evening. Get on your hands and knees and clean this mess up right now before I have you thrown out on the street where you belong." Dolores and Warren froze, completely paralyzed by the aggressive verbal assault. The harsh, cruel words echoed in their ears, mirroring the exact same venomous insults they had hurled at me for decades. They slowly dropped to their knees on the plush carpet, holding their heavy cleaning brushes. Dolores stared down at the dark red stain soaking into the expensive carpet. She raised her trembling hands and began to aggressively scrub the floor, weeping silently as the furious guest continued to yell, demanding perfection. Warren knelt right beside her, looking utterly broken and defeated, his proud, corrupt ego entirely crushed under the severe weight of his new reality. Every single scrub of the brush was a brutal, punishing reminder of the incredible wealth they had maliciously thrown away. They were forced to serve the very same elite society they had once desperately tried to impress. They were permanently trapped working endless, grueling hours inside the magnificent luxury hotel owned by the powerful daughter they abandoned. The changing seasons in Atlanta brought a profound sense of absolute peace to my life. I completely detached myself from the miserable existence of my former family, focusing my entire energy on the future I was building. Ruby Haven officially opened its doors on a crisp Tuesday morning in early October. The massive ribbon-cutting ceremony was nothing short of spectacular. The mayor of Atlanta, local community leaders, and hundreds of grateful families gathered in the central courtyard to celebrate the monumental achievement. The sleek, modern residential towers stood proudly against the city skyline, providing beautiful, affordable luxury homes to the hard-working Black community that desperately needed them. The local press covered the event extensively. The front pages of the premier business journals featured my portrait with bold headlines calling me the ultimate architect of the future of Atlanta. They praised my fierce dedication to ethical real estate and community empowerment. It was a massive validation of the grueling, exhausting work I had put in over the past decade. The painful memories of being called a worthless college dropout by Dolores and Warren were entirely erased, replaced by the undeniable reality of my monumental success. I had taken the brutal, heavy stones they threw at me and used them to build a magnificent, unshakable empire. This empire was constructed not on exploitation, but on genuine upliftment and structural integrity, protecting the very people my greedy parents always heavily despised. But the towering glass buildings and the soaring corporate profits were not the most fulfilling part of my new reality. The true healing came from the incredible community I was actively cultivating through the Nana Ruby Foundation. I had explicitly structured a massive portion of my personal wealth to directly fund full academic scholarships and comprehensive foster care support programs for orphaned children across the state. I became a highly active mentor and an official legal sponsor for a dozen bright, ambitious teenagers who had been abandoned or severely mistreated by the foster system. I spent my weekends hosting workshops, mentoring sessions, and joyful community dinners for these incredible, resilient kids. When I looked into their hopeful eyes, I saw the exact same desperate craving for love and stability that I had carried my entire life. I made a solemn vow to provide them with the absolute, unconditional support I was heavily denied. We formed a beautiful, unbreakable bond. I finally realized that a true family is not automatically dictated by shared DNA or forced biological obligations. A genuine family is deliberately chosen. It is built entirely on a foundation of mutual respect, profound sincerity, and unwavering support. I was completely surrounded by people who loved me for my heart and my character, not for the size of my bank account or my social status. They respected the fierce, protective woman I had chosen to become, and I fiercely loved them back in return. Throughout this entire transformative journey, there was one specific person who remained my absolute steadfast anchor: Elias Thorne, the brilliant, formidable lawyer who had aggressively defended my grandmother and stood by my side during the darkest legal battles, had slowly evolved into something much more than just a trusted legal advisor. Our endless late-night strategy meetings and intense boardroom battles gradually gave way to quiet, intimate dinners and deep, meaningful conversations. He was a man of immense integrity, matching my ruthless ambition with his own calm, unbreakable strength. One cool autumn evening, Elias and I took a long, quiet walk through the sprawling, immaculate botanical gardens located at the very heart of the Ruby Haven complex. The soft, golden ambient lighting illuminated the winding stone pathways. Elias gently reached out and took my hand, intertwining his fingers perfectly with mine. It was a simple, quiet gesture, but it carried a profound, heavy weight of genuine, emotional safety. He looked at me with deep, dark eyes filled with absolute respect and undeniable affection. "You built a magnificent paradise," Nia, Elias said, his deep voice carrying a warm, comforting resonance. Your grandmother would be incredibly proud of the fiercely protective, brilliant woman you have become." I smiled, leaning my head against his strong shoulder, letting the absolute peace of the moment wash over me completely. I knew I had finally found a man who would never try to diminish my brilliant, bright light. I had found an equal partner, a man who was entirely unthreatened by my massive power and wealth. With Elias by my side, I felt completely invincible. As November rapidly approached, the crisp autumn air signaled the arrival of the holiday season. In the dark, painful past, the holidays were always a source of severe anxiety and brutal emotional abuse. Thanksgiving dinners at the Buckhead Mansion were highly toxic battlegrounds where I was constantly degraded and humiliated for the cruel entertainment of my arrogant relatives. But this year was going to be entirely different. For the very first time in my entire adult life, I decided to host a massive, extravagant Thanksgiving feast at my sprawling downtown penthouse. I was determined to reclaim the holiday and completely rewrite the narrative of my life. I spent days meticulously planning a luxurious gourmet menu and organizing the perfect, elegant decor to celebrate my incredible new chosen family. I sat at my pristine glass desk, carefully sealing a stack of premium heavy ivory envelopes stamped with elegant gold foil. They were exclusive private invitations to my upcoming holiday celebration. I addressed them to the loyal corporate team members, the brilliant scholarship students, and the devoted friends who had fought alongside me in the dark trenches. I smiled a sharp, satisfied smile as I handed the thick stack of premium invitations to my executive assistant, instructing her to deliver them immediately across the bustling city of Atlanta. I took a very deep, refreshing breath, standing tall by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The grand penthouse they once arrogantly demanded was now ready to host a truly magnificent holiday celebration. The fourth Thursday of November arrived, wrapping the bustling city of Atlanta in a crisp, beautiful twilight. Inside my massive downtown penthouse, the atmosphere was entirely transformed. For decades, Thanksgiving had been a miserable, highly toxic battleground where Dolores and Warren used the dinner table as a stage to publicly humiliate me. Today, the air was thick with the rich, comforting aroma of roasted turkey, candied yams, and freshly baked sweet potato pie. Warm, golden light radiated from the crystal chandeliers, reflecting off the pristine floor to ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city skyline. The sprawling dining table was beautifully set, with elegant gold-rimmed china and lush autumnal centerpieces. But the true beauty of the evening was the incredible people sitting around it. I did not invite a single drop of toxic blood into my home. My guests were the bright, ambitious young women from the Nana Ruby Foundation who had fought their way out of the foster system. They sat beside the fiercely loyal corporate executives who had stood by my side when my holding company was under severe media attack. Elias Thorne stood near the roaring stone fireplace looking incredibly handsome in a tailored burgundy blazer, effortlessly making the scholarship students laugh with a charming story about his early days in law school. There was no fake high society posturing. There were no designer labels required to earn a seat at this table. There was only loud, genuine laughter, deep mutual respect, and the profound, unbreakable warmth of a family I had consciously chosen to build from the ground up. While the penthouse echoed with joyful celebration, a brutally different reality was unfolding 40 miles outside the city limits. Inside the cold, sterile cafeteria of the State Correctional Labor Facility, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed aggressively overhead. The massive cinder-block rooms smelled of stale bleach and boiled cabbage. Dolores and Warren sat hunched over a scratched metal table, wearing their faded, heavily stained gray uniform jumpsuits. There were no crystal champagne flutes or imported caviar here. Instead, they stared down at compartmentalized plastic trays containing dry, unseasoned turkey, a scoop of watery mashed potatoes, and a hard, stale bread roll. Dolores picked up her flimsy plastic fork, her calloused, blistered hands trembling violently from hours of forced manual labor, sorting industrial laundry. She looked across the loud, chaotic mess hall, where hundreds of other inmates shouted and argued over their miserable meals. She closed her sunken, exhausted eyes, and a single bitter tear slipped down her hollow cheek. She remembered the lavish Buckhead mansion, the expensive catered holiday parties, and the endless flow of absolute luxury she had foolishly thrown away, out of pure spite and greed. Warren sat silently beside her, chewing on the dry, tasteless bread, completely stripped of his arrogant corporate ego. He did not look at his wife. He did not offer any comfort. Their highly toxic marriage, which had been built entirely on a foundation of money and fake prestige, had completely disintegrated the very second the bank accounts were frozen. Several blocks away in the maximum security wing, Kendra experienced an even darker personal hell. Because of her highly violent arson charges, she was entirely barred from the general population. Holiday dinner. She sat alone in her cramped, freezing solitary confinement cell, staring blankly at the solid iron door. A guard had shoved a lukewarm styrofoam container through the narrow metal slot an hour ago, but Kendra had not touched it. The former golden child who once demanded to live in my luxury penthouse was now permanently caged in a tiny concrete box, completely forgotten by the wealthy elite society she had worshipped. Her fake billionaire husband, Preston, was rotting in a federal prison 2 states away, having completely abandoned her to save his own skin. They were all collectively drowning in the miserable permanent consequences of their own malicious greed. Back in the vibrant warmth of my penthouse, I tapped a silver spoon gently against my crystal champagne flute. The joyful conversations around the massive dining table slowly quieted down as every single guest turned their attention toward me. I stood up from the head of the table holding my glass high. I looked around the room, locking eyes with the brilliant students, the dedicated employees, and finally, meeting the deep, warm gaze of Elias, who smiled at me with absolute, unyielding pride. For my entire life, I was aggressively taught that family was strictly defined by shared blood. I began, my voice ringing clearly across the quiet room. I was told that you had to accept cruelty, manipulation, and deep disrespect simply because you shared the same last name. But sitting here tonight, looking at all of your beautiful, resilient faces, I finally understand the absolute truth. Family is not the people who use their power to drown you when you are struggling to breathe. Family is the people who stay firmly by your side when you have absolutely nothing left to offer them. I raised my glass slightly higher, the crystal catching the warm, ambient light. Family is the people who help you build everything back from the ashes when the entire world tries to burn you down. I continued, feeling a profound sense of total liberation wash over my soul. You are my true family. You are the bright, brilliant future of my legacy. Thank you for filling this home with genuine, beautiful love. The entire room erupted into a chorus of joyful, enthusiastic cheers. Glasses clinked together in a beautiful symphony of victory and absolute peace. Elias stepped forward, wrapping his strong arms securely around my waist and pressing a soft kiss to my temple. I took a slow, refreshing sip of my champagne, perfectly content. The heavy, dark door to my deeply painful past was finally completely and permanently closed, leaving me fully open to a powerful, unstoppable, completely magnificent new chapter of profound, unyielding, and absolutely glorious personal triumph, alongside my truly beloved. The morning after my magnificent Thanksgiving celebration dawned bright and perfectly clear over the sprawling city of Atlanta. I woke up early, long before the bustling city streets below my downtown penthouse began to fill with heavy traffic. I wrapped a thick silk robe around my shoulders and stepped out onto my expansive private balcony, holding a steaming cup of dark roast coffee in my hands. The crisp autumn wind brushed against my face, bringing with it a profound sense of absolute untethered freedom. I leaned against the cool glass railing and looked out over the magnificent skyline. The rising sun cast a brilliant golden glow across the towering skyscrapers and bustling commercial districts. Several of those massive glass and steel structures belonged entirely to me now, including the towering, newly finished residential blocks of Ruby Haven in the distance. I stood there absorbing the stunning reality of my massive empire. For the very first time in my entire 30 years of existence, my chest felt completely light. There was no lingering anxiety about what my mother Dolores might say to humiliate me. There was no heavy shadow of my father Warren and his corrupt financial schemes hanging over my head. There was no toxic competition from my sister Kendra, constantly trying to prove she was the untouchable golden child. They were all gone, permanently locked away in the miserable concrete consequences of their own malicious greed. I took a slow, deeply refreshing sip of my coffee and turned my back on the sweeping city views. I walked back inside my quiet, peaceful home. The penthouse was immaculate, the remnants of last night's beautiful, joyful feast, already perfectly cleared away by my dedicated staff. The rich, warm scent of cinnamon and roasted pecans still lingered faintly in the air, serving as a gentle reminder of the chosen family that now filled my life with genuine love. I made my way down the wide hallway and stepped into my private executive home office. The morning light flooded through the massive windows, illuminating my sleek, pristine glass desk. For years, my parents had aggressively forced us to take highly staged professional family portraits. They would dress us in stiff, uncomfortable designer clothing and make us smile for the cameras, desperately trying to project an illusion of flawless elite perfection to their wealthy country club friends. Those fake hollow pictures used to sit on every single surface of their Buckhead mansion. I never kept a single one of them. Instead, I reached into a velvet protective pouch on my desk and pulled out a heavy, polished silver picture frame. I carefully placed it right in the center of my pristine glass workspace. Inside the beautiful silver frame was a candid, unfiltered photograph taken several years ago inside a sterile hospital room. It was a picture of me and Nana Ruby. In the photograph, I was wearing a faded, worn-out sweatshirt, looking completely exhausted from working 3 grueling jobs to pay for her medication. Nana Ruby was sitting in her hospital bed, hooked up to various medical monitors. But despite the bleak clinical surroundings, her beautiful, deeply lined face was lit up with the most radiant, joyful smile. She was gripping my hand tightly, looking at me with absolute, profound, unconditional pride. That photograph captured more genuine love and authentic connection than my parents had ever experienced in their entire miserable lives. I gently traced my finger over the cool glass of the frame, silently thanking the fierce, brilliant woman who had taught me how to build unbreakable armor. I positioned the photograph perfectly so it would be the very first thing I saw every single morning. Right next to the silver frame, I placed a heavy, customized crystal plaque. It was the highest philanthropic honor awarded by the City of Atlanta, officially recognizing the Nana Ruby Foundation for our groundbreaking work in funding massive academic scholarships and providing safe, secure housing for minority foster children. I looked at the sparkling crystal award and the beautiful photograph of my grandmother side by side. They represented my true, hard-earned legacy. My toxic biological family had spent decades obsessively trying to acquire power through deceit, financial fraud, and ruthless emotional manipulation. They worshipped a fake, superficial version of success that required them to constantly tear other people down. They genuinely believed that destroying my self-esteem would somehow elevate their own pathetic social status. Preston thought his fake old money heritage gave him the absolute right to treat me like dirt. Kendra thought her golden child status made her completely untouchable. Warren and Dolores thought their stolen wealth made them invincible gods who could never face consequences. But their absolute insatiable greed became the very poison that destroyed them. They dug their own deep graves, built their own federal prison cells, and locked themselves inside without me ever having to lift a single finger to push them. I survived their cruelty and transformed it into unstoppable power. I stood tall behind my beautiful glass desk, feeling the warm morning sunlight wash completely over my face. I looked directly forward, speaking the ultimate truth I had learned through blood, sweat, and painful tears. The sweetest, most satisfying revenge is never found in dirtying your own hands to actively destroy the miserable lives of the people who hurt you. The absolute perfect revenge is simply stepping aside and letting their own boundless toxic greed completely consume and destroy them from the inside out. You do not have to fight ugly monsters in the mud to win the ultimate war. You just have to fiercely protect your own bright light, relentlessly build your massive success, and absolutely never ever look back at the ashes they left behind. I smiled a deep, radiant, and entirely unbroken smile as the golden Atlanta sun illuminated my magnificent, victorious world. The dark, painful chapter of my past was permanently closed. I had finally won everything. The ultimate lesson from this journey is that true family is never defined merely by bloodline, but by unwavering respect, genuine love, and mutual support. Toxic environments, even when created by your own parents, do not dictate your worth or your future. Setting firm boundaries is a courageous act of self-preservation, not selfishness. You do not have to fight monsters in the mud to win. The absolute most powerful revenge is simply walking away, building magnificent success, and letting their greed consume them. Please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share your own survival stories in the comments below.